Hello, it is Friday, which means it is Storytime Fridays, the day of the week that I share with you a story that is inspired by the posts I've shared during the week on Watershed Witness. And if you've been following those posts, you will have seen my exuberance at encountering a kingfisher. This week you will have also seen the learning process accompanied with that little caterpillar which ended up hitchhiking on my bag, and you will have also seen my extended interaction upsetting a raven that was very keen to let me know how annoyed it was with me. So the story I'm inspired to share with you this week reflects the love of the natural world that I've always held, but in particular my fascination, my never-ending curiosity about the other creatures that we share this blue and green sphere with. I think a lot of people love animals, undoubtedly so. So let me ask you, you've probably had somebody ask you at some point, what is your earliest memory? I'm going to ask you something a little bit different. I'm going to ask you, what is your earliest memory of another creature, another animal? For me, that memory is very clear. And this is the story I want to share with you. I must have been no more than 3 or 4 years old. It was in the 1970s, summer, a hot, long, dry summer. And my mother had taken me to visit my grandmother. Whilst my mother and grandmother were sat in deck chairs talking out in the sun on that lawn, as brown as it was in the hot summer sun, I, quite sensibly, had been placed in the shade with a few toys to keep me occupied, right beside my grandmother's rose bed. And my grandmother loved her roses. Oh, she would spend hours on them. And as I sat there by the rose bed, I remember looking at the edge of the flower bed where the soil meets the grass. And I dare say you, like me, probably have grass which is very tattered edges on the edge of your flower beds. Not my grandmother's rose bed, no. She was a demon with a half-moon lawn edger. It was crisp, it was sharp. Wouldn't be surprised if she ever used a ruler on it. It was that sharp, the distinction between grass and soil, the soil in which her beloved roses grew. And I was looking at the soil, I remember that. And I remember just taking in the sights of the stones sort of baked into the hard soil. And my eyes began to follow the crisp edge of this rose bed upwards, outwards, along, towards the fence, towards the shade of the shrubs. And that's when I saw it, in the shadows, silently, sinuously, sliding. Do you like the alliteration? That's a clue. Because what I saw coming into sight, making its way along the rose bed, its body sliding against that crisp lawn edge, was a snake, a serpent. I didn't know then it was a snake, but I do remember being transfixed as this long creature made its way towards me. Its olive body and its bright golden eye and its tongue tasting the air. And it became aware of me and my presence for certain. But it didn't stop, it kept coming, slowly but steadily, closer and closer. And when it reached the place where I was sitting, it stopped. And it lifted its head ever so slightly off the soil, its tongue continuing to flick and taste the air, its golden eye looking at me, looking into me. And I looked back into those golden eyes, and I looked into it. And it felt as if the world just dissolved, fell away. In that moment, it is hard to describe, but this bubble of silence, it was just a moment in time stretched. And I knew this snake was no threat. And this snake knew I was no threat. Reassured, it lowered its head and continued on its way. And as its muscular body began to move past me, I remember my little chubby fingers reaching out to touch its body as it slid beneath my fingers. And that snake did not stop, did not flinch at my touch, didn't speed up, it just carried on, certain that it had nothing to fear from me. And then this moment of magic was shattered by a scream, my mother's scream. My mother had looked over, I imagine, and seen her youngest child with his fingers reached out to this great snake, and I imagine something primeval then kicked in. What happened next was a blur. I remember the pain of hands under my armpits as I was violently yanked upwards from the ground into some imagined safety. I remember lots of noise, lots of commotion, a blue bucket and a spade. My grandmother had the blue bucket and the spade, as she then began to show man's place upon the food chain. I didn't understand. I thought I had done something wrong. I was upset. I was crying. After the beating stopped, the spade was used to scoop the snake's body into the bucket, and my grandmother ran indoors. I couldn't comprehend, and I asked. However, I can't be certain. I certainly did not have the ability to speak with any great eloquence, but I must have made myself understood, because I do remember my mother telling me, "Oh, Grandma's flushed it down the toilet." And I was heartbroken. I do remember wishing that somehow my new friend might find his way back into the bottom of the toilet bowl, where it could curl up, biding its time to take its revenge the next time my grandmother sat down on the toilet. But no, of course, that never happened. But that experience left a permanent mark on me. From that day to this, I have viewed other living creatures in a certain way, a certain light. Have you ever stared into the eyes of a pet, of a dog or a cat, and felt something at a deeper level as you wonder what they see, what they think as their eyes gaze back into yours? When I was 15, I came across an excerpt from a book, The Outermost Post by Henry Beston. And the passage that I read resonated for me instantly, took root inside me, because it reflected for me with an eloquence I did not possess my own thoughts, my own feelings on the matter. And it seems only fair that we finish this Friday story time with that passage, which to this day is one of the very few things I can quote off by heart. The animal shall not be measured by man. In a world older than ours, they move more finished, more complete, gifted with senses that we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not underlings, and they are not brethren. They are other nations, prisoners with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow travellers in the splendour and travail of the earth. See you next week.